It's January the 3rd, 2024. I can't remember if I got last night right or not. I'm going to be your host tonight, Dana Durnford. Hope you're doing well. And you can call into these live shows at 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. We got a poll. Is nuclear power an abysmal curse on Japan's country, its food, its health, the species, and the survival of the country and its future? And there's only one answer, and everybody seemed to gravitate towards that. We appreciate it. So, day 3, and with nuclear, with big earthquakes, it takes several days before some of the facts come out. It generally takes a couple of weeks or a month before you're able to get an actual picture of what really took place. And in this case, we got thousands of homes have collapsed. And we don't have much information on that at this time. This story is still playing out. There's people still being rescued. There's areas where rescuers still haven't reached. This was on tectonic plates. And I've tried to get her a little depiction so you can appreciate it. So you can see where the epicenter is, and that's up there where the white and red dot is to. And there's two arrows over there. One is the Ishikawa nuclear plant, and the other one is the Kashiwazaki plant, and that's depicted in that arrow over there. Now, in between those two, which are not very far apart, is you're going to see a dotted line. At the top of the dotted line, you're going to see where two tectonic plates are highlighted, the Eurasian plate and the North American plate. And what happens is these plates slip, and you're talking about maybe 500-600 miles of continental shelves are slipping on each other, and that's what's causing these significant earthquakes. And so then you have two, which is the world's biggest nuclear power plant over right there at around 8 gigawatts. This is incredible. And the Ishikawa nuclear power plant, now don't quote me, but as far as I know, both of these plants are not running. But you can't believe anything the Japanese government or the nuclear industry tells you, and history has clearly showed that to be true. You're making a real mistake if you believe anything those despicable scumbags tell you. And so we haven't got any hard proof, but we do have a lot of damage way past that way and way past this way. Significant damage. But allegedly there's no damage at both nuclear power plants. Now they acknowledged that some water yesterday in a single story has crept out of a pool, so to speak, a fuel pool. Fuel pools where they store decades of reactor cores, and these are the boiling water reactor designs. And it's not very difficult to understand. And if they put the reactor cores in pools at the top of the buildings, there's 2 pools at the top of each of the reactor buildings. And so they got decades of reactor cores, and if they lose water, they'll melt down the same as Chernobyl times 1,000. Now, each of these reactor cores are pure uranium, pure plutonium, and they're in fuel pools. Now, so the Ishikawa nuclear power plant was down for maintenance, which means a large chunk of the reactor core is still in the reactor. They're not going to take out all the fuel, they're just going to take out some of the fuel. And they might have been transferring fuel when the accident, earthquakes happened. And if they don't have water, 100% of the times, the zirconium cladding will catch fire instantly. It'll burn at around 1800 degrees. And then the fuel pellets, uranium, plutonium fuel pellets inside of it will catch fire because you got an 1800 degree fire going on. And they'll burn at 5,000 and 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And once a couple percentages of it burns, that's a nuclear meltdown, and it's pretty hard to stop the rest from burning. At 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, or even 5,000, the fuel pool will boil dry almost instantaneously. And so the whole package burns dramatically, and these toxins that are catastrophic to everything with replicating cells are released into the environment. And so you got to put this in the forefront instead of the back, because you got to assume something happened. And so let's just walk through this, and I'll give you some of my evidence to suggest that we have to be very cautious moving forward with this story. Now, the nuclear industry can't survive another nuclear meltdown anywhere on the entire planet. They're going to cover it up. No maybes, no perhaps. They're very fragile right now. This year, renewables were 440 gigawatts in 12 months. The entire 80 years of nuclear power is only 365 gigawatts. So in a single year, renewables were able to exceed the entire 80-year, 8-decade capacity of nuclear power plants. So this is just going to accelerate. So they're feeling vulnerable. There is no nuclear renaissance. There's a lot of posturing, like small modular reactors, but they don't exist. And there's no complete licenses, applications into the regulatory authorities anywhere on the entire planet. So they're hoodwinking you there and manipulating you into buying stocks that are actually useless. They've been doing that significantly for 12 years since Fukushima nuclear meltdowns. Japan quake death toll rise to 73. It's going to go a lot higher. We're talking thousands of homes have collapsed, and they have no equipment there. They have no way of getting in there to remove stuff, to find the bodies. This was violent shaking. You couldn't stand up. And so anybody that was elderly, for instance, had no hope at all of escaping, because you couldn't even stand up. This was a 7 out of a 7 on the Shitsu scale, which is different than the Richter scale with the international recognition. And so their scale is only based on 7. So each number of the Japanese scale, you have to multiply it by 1.428 to get the animosity equivalent of the Richter scale. Okay, so you got 73 confirmed dead as of later this afternoon. Now, the earthquake was 30 kilometers east-northeast of Wajima with a depth of 16 kilometers. They still haven't, this is 3 days later, we still don't have confirmation that this happened offshore, which is quite bizarre. I've never seen that before. And they normally give you a latitude and longitude, not an actual distance and depth. That's very unusual when it comes to Japan. Japan's government, the nuclear industry, is absolutely disgusting, despicable, revolting parasites. And they're extraordinarily adept at lying. These are despicable scumbags. So they said it registered at the highest level of 7, which is the Japanese scale, seismic intensity scale, in the town of Shika. Shika is very close to ground zero. There was major damage over here. So make no mistake, something that close would have got significant damage. And this building is 4 decades old. The reactors are very fragile. In fact, they're brittle. And the fuel pools are the same way. Everything is supposed to be in the fuel pools for the Kishiwaka, but the Shika nuclear power plant was down for maintenance. So those reactor cores, there was 2 of them there, would have been full of fuel. We got lots of pictures to get through tonight. So what was really interesting, the town of Shika was a 7 out of a 7. That's the animosity of a 10 earthquake. Note too at the very top, up where the depiction is, it was 4,500 homes collapsed. Some of them just turned to matchsticks. It was very shallow earthquake. It was very laterally violent shaking. A 7 out of 7, you can't stand up, no matter how strong you are, no matter how able you are. Even if there's something there for you to hold on to, you can't stand up. These reactors are very fragile. So this was a story. We covered this yesterday. We're going to cover it again tonight. Japan's nuclear power plant largely undamaged. Largely undamaged. So this is the other nuclear site. The Kashiwaka. I'm going to butcher some names because I don't speak Japanese. And I wouldn't want to. So its electricity system partially disabled following the quake. Partially disabled. If you've been following the Zaporizhzhia plant in Ukraine, in Russia, you would know that if the plant loses external power, because it's dependent upon external power, it can melt down. So the Ishikawa plant, the Nuclear Regulation Authority, which is zero to do with nuclear and regulation and authority, reported the Ishikawa plant workers heard what sounded like an explosion, smelled something burning. Now, why be so vague? They're the regulation authority. They would know exactly, unequivocally what happened. That's their job. Their job is to tally that. They're supposed to report it immediately. And if they're making a statement, it's not because they're in the dark, it's because they know exactly what took place. So why were they incredibly vague about anything that happened there when that's not their job? Their job is to know exactly or be able to articulate exactly what happened there. Neurotransformer that receives electricity for use in number 2 reactors, which are probably 3/4 full because you only change a partial amount of the fuel. Staff checked the area, discovered the fire extinguishing system had been activated. And so this is the weirdest paragraph you're ever going to read if you know anything about this topic, because this is like they're talking second-hand, third-hand information. When they're the authority, they're supposed to get documentation articulating exactly, specifically what happened. And they're so vague, that should leave you very worried. At Kashiwazaki, Karika, blah, 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 in Niigata prefecture, home to 7 nuclear reactors, which were offline before the quake. Plant officials confirmed Monday the water from a spent fuel pool spilled over due to the earthquake. Of course it did. But when you think about these fuel pools, you got to appreciate how significant these things actually are. They're not pools in a conventional sense. Each liter of water is saturated with anthropogenic man-made atoms, because the fuel is still splitting atoms. When you talk about nuclear waste is dangerous for a long time, they've never told you this sentence. The fuel rods are still splitting atoms. The same amount of atoms they need to boil water for millions of homes, they're still releasing that into the environment, and there's no longer a containment. This is why the majority of these places are surrounded by farms. So they confirmed that water from spent fuel. Again, this is incredibly vague. How much water? Normally, you would get incredibly detailed information about something like this. You would get how much liters, how many gallons, how many 45-gallon drums, how much, how long, where to go, how was it dealt with. This is very dangerous stuff, by the way. And in fact, if you drink a liter of it, you will die that day or that week, for sure. At Tokyo Electric Power Company's, the other plant that we're talking about, which is this one up right here, and so these are in between both of them is a fault line. Now, they're saying they're going to be doing a whole bunch of stuff with fuel at this site, but yet, because they're trying to get a nuclear renaissance on the go, but these are on fault lines. And after an earthquake of a 7 out of a 7 scale, a perfect 10, which is something you don't want, they're talking about restarting those. Today they're in the media bragging about it. It's just surreal. The 7.6 magnitude quake, which was a 7 out of a 7, which is a 10 quake. This is why 4,500 homes collapsed. Not a 7.6. led to the evacuation of 9 prefectures. 9 prefectures. So these 2 plants are in the same prefecture, basically. So 9 prefectures had significant damage and evacuation. How bad was ground zero going to be? And so we don't have any proof, of course, because they can't survive another meltdown. Additional problems reported at other nuclear power plants. Of course, you can't quantify these assertions for long, extended periods because these are big, vast sites. And you're talking about a million pieces of equipment makes up these sites. And so we got a ton of pictures to get through tonight. I'm going to just back up for 1 second. Let's cover last night for 1 second. So when the show was over last night, I had 8 views. 8 views. You can see it highlighted up there. But I had 52 likes. But I only had 8 views. But I had 52 likes, though. I had 63 viewers at a single time. And I had 163 views according to YouTube. But when the video was over, I had 8 views. So it was 1 hour, 20 minutes, 28 seconds. 9 hours later was 1 hour, 20 minutes, 28 seconds. 12 hours later was 1 hour, 20 minutes, and 16 seconds. I lost 12 seconds on that video. Now, the last nuclear accident they had, here's the American media pretending they're in the fuel pool of a reactor 4 at Fukushima that doesn't even exist. So if you think that they won't lie to you, if you think that there's checks and balances, if you think the Nuclear Regulatory Agency is actually some kind of an authority, then explain this to me. Because this is not a game. You might think it is, but it's not a game because you're going to breathe this in. Your children are going to breathe it in. You're going to get sick. And they're going to have illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses that are going to bankrupt you in the long term, destroy them in the short term. Okay, so let's step back one more night. I had 7 views 1 minute after the video was over. This was the first show of the earthquake. This is the day the earthquake happened. So 11 hours later, I still had 55 minutes and 34 seconds. But as soon as I hit 12 hours and it goes past it, I've never seen me lose 12 seconds like we did in last night's video. But it gained from 34 seconds to 46 seconds. It gained 12 seconds. Is that 34 or 32? 34. So we gained 12 seconds. And what we believe, this is happening every day, every show after 12 hours. My videos usually get longer by 6 seconds. Then my comments will show up, and I've been censored heavily, okay? It's probably hard for the average person, if you're not familiar with the site, to comprehend the significance of what I'm telling to you. But see this picture here? I put that picture together. Nobody else put that picture together for you for some reason. I did, though. And what you see is 4 major medias, the biggest ones. You got CNN, ABC Australia, BBC United Kingdom, and CBS. These are all the biggest medias worldwide. And they're pretending they're in the fuel pool at the top of a building to the left that doesn't exist. Does that concern you? Does that concern you? And I'm going to show you why they're doing that. And then we're going to jump into the earthquake stories from today and massive amount of pictures. But I feel like this is the 3rd show on this subject because I normally cover nuclear 5 days a week typically. I'm trying. Okay, so I'm just going to walk you back through the time machine so you can comprehend why I'm talking the way I'm talking tonight. Why I'm suggesting there's a nuclear accident and that you have to be very cautious from here on out. You have to take it serious until it can be proven otherwise. Officials admit deadly Fukushima meltdown cover-up. TEPCO president, we lied about the meltdowns. It was a cover-up. It was a grave issue. It's an unprecedented nuclear disaster. As bad as it gets. It's an unpardonable breach of trust. And so the repercussions from not warning people are severe. Congenital heart disease operations rose 14% So 14.2% increase of open heart surgery for neonates and infants per 100,000 live births across the entire country. You're talking about congenital malformations. If you don't have the open heart surgery, they're going to have, they're still going to have anyway, but they're going to have incredibly disfiguring and debilitating illnesses and diseases and disfigurements. So here we are, 2019, where you're talking about catastrophic numbers. You're talking about 14,200 newborns out of 100,000 need open heart surgery. Is unbelievable. And there's only one thing that they all got in common, was Fukushima radioactive fallout. There was another study where pre-Fukushima was 1 in a million children would have thyroid tumors. And this one year later, you had 13,646 out of 38,000, which is 35.8%, which scaled up is 358,000 out of a million. Pre-Fukushima, a year before that, was 1 in a million. And if you scale it up, you're going to find it even worse again. In the first year, cancer cases rose, according to Japan's National Cancer Center, who stopped releasing the data after this one. In the last 11 years have refused to release the data. The number of cancer patients rose by 865,000 in Japan. What caused all of these illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries? What could be a catalyst, I wonder? This is significant because not everybody got health care, not everybody got insurance, not everybody was diagnosed, not everybody felt ill, not everybody got just cancer. Cancer is not the only diseases or illnesses or autoimmune deficiencies or injuries that will manifest. There's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. You get where I'm coming from? Your immune system is compromised, so you're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that are normally harmless and innocuous and benign. So you have to take it in consideration. This is not a game. An ambassador writes to the UN Secretary General, it is no exaggeration to say that the fate of Japan and the entire world, the fate of the world depends on a number 4 reactor. Think about that statement. The fate of the world depends on a single building not melting down. The fuel pool's not catching fire. And that's the building they're talking about. So the fate of the world depending on that not happening. Guess what happened? And the fuel pool's reactor core is at the very top of these 190-foot, 65-meter, 19-story buildings. Here's another expert. Doomsday-like radiation release if the fire in the pool at Unit 4, it would be a global catastrophe. If there was a fire in the fuel pool at the top of the building, it would be a global catastrophe. Why do you think these people are pretending they're in a fuel pool that don't exist, I wonder? Are we going to pretend this is not happening? Are we going to go back to sleep and say, oh, it doesn't affect me. I'm invisible. Nothing, radiation can't hurt me. I don't eat food. I don't drink water. I don't breathe air. I'm special. There was a nuclear scientist academic on the entire planet that looked at Reactor 3 and Reactor 4. This was just after the accident and said that the fuel pool or the reactor cores were intact. There's not a single one on the entire planet. Not a single academic in the nuclear industry, not nobody from Harvard University or Stanford University or Oxford University or MIT University or anywhere else, looked at those buildings and said the fuel pool and reactor core was intact, but your world media came out and told you they were intact. The Japanese told you they were intact. In fact, said that years later they got all the fuel out of the pool from buildings that don't exist. Interesting, isn't it? Why do you think they're doing that? Here's a model of the radioactive fallout from French government. Not a model, but a study showing 1 to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. And this is 31 days of radioactive fallout right there. And that covers the entire planet. You really think you didn't breathe that in? You really think your children and your friends and your families and your loved ones didn't breathe it in? You don't think all the birds and animals and mammals didn't breathe it in? And the insects weren't wiped out because they were sterilized by this incredible full-body X-rays pounding every species on the planet? Fukushima is the most serious man-made disaster in human history. Obesity rates are now nearly double the Japan average. The excess weight gain after a nuclear crisis is a marker of radiation brain damage. You know a lot of people gain weight right out of the blue? Were skinny, normal weight all their lives, and all of a sudden they got heavy? because they were poisoned by the Japanese machine. Think about the contempt here. Fukushima 311 tapes. It's time to make a geezer suicide squad, an elderly person, people who worked all their life and deserve to retire in peace. These people want to use them like a paper towel and did. In fact, 60 and older should be prepared to die at the Fukushima plant. This was an official notebook. Concerned half of Japan to be covered in nuclear waste. The entire country is covered in nuclear waste. You got any idea how many billions and billions of pounds they ship out of there each year into your countries of radioactive food? 60 and older should be prepared to die at Fukushima. In fact, Tokyo Vice Governor suggested a Fukushima draft. If your gas plant breaks down, you don't have to sacrifice everybody 60 and over, do you? If your oil plant breaks down, you don't have to sacrifice everybody. You don't have a draft. You know what a draft is? It's like a military. Forced as conscription like they're doing in Ukraine. TEPCO has worked vigilantly to shut out close scrutiny of the ravaged plant's condition. Both of these buildings, they said they got the fuel out of the pools that were at the very top of the buildings, which are 4 times higher than the stumps that are left. Does anybody really believe that story? And because whether you understand it or not, you're being impacted by it. And until you hold this industry accountable and oust them off this friggin' planet, and you got the power to do it, whether you realize it or not, you're the power. Your voice is incredibly powerful. Japan Times column, as the public possibly worldwide sickens over time, the truth will come out about Fukushima. We just got a little bit more to get through. Discharges of Fukushima nuclear material into the Pacific effectively contaminated the sea, and they got you dreaming about tritium, do they? In fact, they picked up over 30 million one-ton bags and had them stored at 105,000 sites. 30 million one-ton bags, each in the back of a pickup truck. A one-ton pickup truck is 5 rows of traffic around the entire planet. But they got most of the world convinced nothing got out. Only the animosity equivalent, they said on July the 13th of this year was, or last year, was equal to 3 grams of sugar. New York Times. We have Fukushima polluting the entire Pacific Ocean, and we're talking about how people should be dressed. How about this story? Nuclear fallout will engulf Taiwan. People should stay home or immediately take off their clothes and cleanse their nuclear contaminants. Well, you can't cleanse it. You put it in a garbage bag and you give it to the dump and tell them not to incinerate it, because you're just going to liberate those isotopes back into the environment. In fact, radioactive rain caused 130 schools in Korea to close. Try wrapping your mind around these statements. If we do nothing, even Tokyo could become off limits. Oswald, we may not be able to live in Japan someday. Radiation is going to be flowing out for a long period of time. These are very, very honest and accurate depictions of what's happening. It's time to quit nuclear power altogether. It threatens the very existence of human civilization as we know it. 60 and older should be prepared to sacrifice themselves when the plant breaks down. How could you let something like that exist on your planet? Human civilization may destroy itself. Liquefaction of 3 nuclear reactor cores. It was actually 4 and 8 fuel pools. The first time any core ever liquefied. Each of the buildings are worse than all nuclear meltdowns in history combined, including Chernobyl. Japan's reactors were pure uranium, pure plutonium. This was Michio Kaku, a famous physicist from California, by the way. Nobel Prize winner on NHK. The only way to preserve human life is to completely turn away from nuclear power. You know, 5,000 nuke plant workers suffer internal radiation exposure despite wearing paper suits. That's a bit of a joke around here, because paper suits can't protect you. We're almost to the stories, by the way. Over 60 million Japanese irradiated by Fukushima. 50,000 square miles. In fact, the food was banned by 55 countries for a decade. But they got the majority of the planet convinced only 2.2 grams of tritium got out of these buildings, which had millions of pounds in each of them. That all got out. These are catastrophic events. It's time for everybody to start getting educated. It's not that difficult. 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested got diabetes. 6 in 10 children. We're expecting diabetes in children from Fukushima. And children with over 11 becquerels, 11 atoms per kilogram, will start to see heart problems. And irreversible heart damage with 50 atoms. You can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle and you can't see it. How are you supposed to avoid 50? And the last one, 50 becquerels, which is atoms, because they pulse energy every second. That's the becquerel. Each atom will do it every second, sometimes for millions of years. 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. And you're not immune. Nobody on this planet has an immune trigger to defend against it. You attack it relentlessly for the rest of your life with white blood cells, which means you got less red blood cells. Japan's earthquake death toll rise is 62. It's actually 73, we know. The Noto Peninsula, one of the worst affected areas, hit by more than 100 aftershocks, is actually over 200. When seven-story buildings collapse, you need to be worried. When there's nuclear power plants not very far away, you need to be really worried. The prefecture's Noto Peninsula was severely hit, with several hundred buildings ravaged by fire and flattened in several towns. Suzu, actually, 90% of the 5,000 houses collapsed or turned into kindle. And it was wiped out, and away we go with the rest of the story tonight. More than 300 injured, 20 of them seriously. And when you look at how the Earth just tore itself apart, it's quite stunning, isn't it? More than 40 hours have passed since the disaster. That was this afternoon. And we received a lot of information about people in need of rescue, and there are people waiting for help. Well, there's areas they still can't get into. A lot of these areas, huge areas, tens of thousands of people with thousands of houses collapsed, they're completely isolated. Nobody even knows today, at this stage, what's going on. So you see the before, and then you see the after. Really something. Incredible damage. Be on the lookout for landslides until the evening of Wednesday, which is today. I've been scared because we don't know when the next earthquake will hit. And when you look at the carnage, the absolute carnage, have you ever seen anything like that from an earthquake? Many cities were without running water, which is incredibly dangerous because that's the best way to fire up diseases. A powerful quake measured 7.6, but it was actually a 7 out of a 7 on the Japanese Shindu scale. It was one of more than 400 to shake the region through Wednesday morning. So now they're saying there was 400 earthquakes, smaller earthquakes than the 7 out of a 7, which is the biggest you can get. And that's why you had thousands and thousands of homes collapse. That's why you had 7-story buildings tipping over. That's why you had roads impassable for rescuers for over almost 3 days. Japan's experiences hundreds of earthquakes every year. Yeah, but they just had hundreds in 2 days. And you can see the earth just dropped. So this was a significant... And they got nuclear power plants on both sides of this fault line that they want to start up again. It's the most idiotic thing imaginable. Heavy rains were forecast in the quake-hit area on Wednesday, raising fears of landslides, and could further hinder efforts to free many more trapped under the rubble. Severed roads, damaged infrastructures, remote locations of the hardest hit areas complicated rescue efforts, and the full extent of the damage and casualties remain unclear. We've got a whole bunch of pictures to get to. The first time the roads have been damaged this badly, that's people that's been living there all their lives. They've never seen nothing like it. Which makes you wonder, are we going to have another one? Is this because we did have a tsunami that done significant damage? We got some more pictures there coming up. But we didn't have the big one, and it looks like it's ready to let go of a big one, doesn't it? I have an impression that most people have yet to regain energy to stand up against the momentum at the moment. Several smaller quakes continue to hit the peninsula. Firefighters searching for survivors in the rubble, and you got all these earthquakes happening. You can't go in the buildings, right? Of a partially collapsed building, we're seen rushing out to safety as the earthquake warning alarms went off on Wednesday. Aftershocks continue in the quake zone. There's 73 dead, we know. There's probably more than that. Well, there's 5 more died at the airport. They should be included in that tally. That's 78. Okay, so drone footage of the aftermath. And you don't see any firefighters. You don't see any fire trucks. You don't see any rescuers. You don't see the military. You don't even see survivors. And that's one of the things I really noticed on a lot of these pictures from areas they haven't explored yet. So notice how the buildings are always collapsed and the way they collapsed. The city's been there a very long time. And everybody there's in their 80s and 90s are quick to tell you they've never seen anything as long and violent and destructive in their entire lifespan, or their loved one's lifespan. They've never heard of an action. So you're talking about going back at least 150 years. Nobody has any recognition of this. But it's right on a fault line. And so severe damage. Fire is still burning. There is a couple of people right there. One guy with a fire hose. Bless their hearts. But you don't see any heavy equipment there working. You're not seeing any bulldozers. That's the tsunami in the top foreground again. Let me just bring up the other page. I'll come back in here. And I'll go back through those pictures again. Just bear with me. So that's the tsunami striking that part of the peninsula. Let me do this again. Oh yeah, so it starts right there. And you can see the tsunami coming into the community. Let me move back a little bit. Yeah, so there was a tsunami. This is tsunami damage. I'll move all the way back for you. Again, this is from a video. I'm not going to steal the videos because that's a good way for YouTube to end up getting your strikes on your accounts. Incredible damage everywhere we looked. And that building back there, that just crumbled into bricks. So it has to be incredible amount of shaking to tear a building apart like this. And again, we haven't really seen much footage when you consider how much damage was actually done. We've only seen a small fraction, maybe 5%, if we're lucky, of the damage. But in reality of it is there's 4,500 homes collapsed in Suzu. You see, revealed approximately, the mayor says 90% of the townhouses are either entirely or nearly described, and there are almost no houses left standing in Suzu, which had 5,000 homes. Japan quake death tolls rises to 73 as search for survivors. And so every time you got an earthquake, they got to rush out of this spot here because you got to be considered. Now that 7-story building that tipped over, there was around 100 people are missing in that building. It didn't jolt the Noto Peninsula per se. This was a 7 out of a 7 on the Shindu scale, which is a Japanese earthquake scale. And Taiwan uses that same scale. So a 7 out of a 7 earthquake there is still a 10 out of a 10 earthquake here. Japan's self-defense forces were set up to use helicopters to deliver supplies to cut off areas, with local authorities asking the central government to send self-defense forces personnel for a disaster relief mission. 2,000 firefighters, 740 police officers will newly join the search and rescue efforts. They're running out of time. Municipal authorities, meanwhile, said they have received information about several cases of people buried alive or trapped under collapsed homes in the quake-hit areas that have continued to experience strong quakes. Which usually means that tectonic plate is ready to go again, right? 110,000 homes were without water. And a level 7 quake is described as rendering it impossible for people to remain standing. A level 7 quake. But see, that's pretty vague, right? Because they're not talking about 7 out of 10. They're actually talking about 7 out of 7. Right? So it's a very deceptive practice. And like countries that have a lot of earthquakes and have nuclear use that to manipulate the consensus, because a lot of people don't understand the nuances that you hopefully do at this stage. The New Year's earthquake was centered around 30 kilometers east-northeast of Wajima, with a provincial depth of 16 kilometers, and registered the highest level of 7. So normally they'll talk ocean when this is ocean-borne, and they'll give you latitude and longitude. When they don't give you that, it usually implies it's on land. So 7 out of a 7 on land is a whole different animal. And because there's nuclear power plants not very far away on both sides, and there's actual confirmed tectonic plates right between the two reactors, for goodness sakes. Registers the highest level of 7 on the Japan seismic intensity scale, the Shindu scale, in the town of Ishikawa. So the highest intensity scale in Ishikawa, and Ishikawa is where they got the nuclear power plant that's being refueled. And there was a big plane crash, that's right. Just bear with me. So Ishikawa had a 7 out of a 7 earthquake, and it has a nuclear power plant. And they're claiming a little bit of water spilled out of the pool. But for water to spill out of the pool, the building's literally almost got to tip over. We're talking fuel pools. And there's no one can get there to find out whether there was that damage, because they can't get anywhere near these places. And that the government was telling people not to talk about the nuclear power plants. Yesterday we covered that, right? Registered the highest level of 7 on Japan's seismic intensity scale in the town of Ishikawa. The highest levels of 7, and there's just 7 out of a 7, is the 10 out of a 10 in the Richter scale. In the town of Ishikawa, where they got a nuclear power plant was exchanging fuel, so it was either half full or 3/4. Each of these reactors were half full or 3/4 full of reactor cores. And that fuel could have been in the air when this was happening. And we don't have any answers. We have the Nuclear Regulatory Authority, instead of coming out and being articulate, is so vague, you're pretty sure they committed some kind of a crime. There was some kind of crime happened. Just got some more pictures coming up. Okay, so let's get back into the pictures. Those two buildings right alongside of it burnt right to the ground, right to the crisp. Across the street to your left is burnt. Everything around it is burnt to the crisp. There's very little left of that building. These collapses are incredible. That's an incredible collapse. And so you got all these hundreds of aftershocks, and going in there means you're most likely going to have to run out of there many times. When you see the shaking, these buildings just shook apart. These are very old buildings. You can see this is where the tsunami came ashore and it also burned. And you can see the smoldering remains. They've never seen nothing like this in this area before. And so this should be taken with serious considerations. So the tsunami came ashore here. It wasn't a big one, but it was traveling at almost 400 miles per hour. So it wrecked everything in its sight. And people hanging out in greenhouses. And look at the displacement of the Earth itself. And this is over at least 6 prefectures, this kind of damage. Including where the nuclear power plants are at. People lining up to get their hands in some water. And you can see the Earth dropped to your right. And they were lucky to have a spot like that to hang out into. Most people don't have nothing, including water. All the shrines collapsing. And this was when it was happening, it was just starting, and this was one of the first clips. Ultimately, everybody would have had to sit down. Japan's quake toll rise is actually 93. Look at the damage to that building, though. Holy smoke-a-rooey. I hope everybody was okay. Rescue teams struggling in freezing temperatures on Tuesday to reach the coastal areas. Many are feared trapped under possible thousands. Many are feared trapped under possibility of thousands of destroyed homes. Thousands of destroyed homes. Thousands. When was the last time you heard of an earthquake destroying thousands of homes? And in Suzu, a town of just over 5,000 households, 90% of the houses were destroyed. Like, we keep seeing that over and over and over. Those connotations. A town of just over 5,000 households. Well, how many businesses would have been there? Near the quake's epicenter may have been destroyed. Well, they acknowledge it's around 90%. Not may have, are 100% destroyed. And they haven't gotten there yet. The numbers are liable to be significantly high. Deaths. Around 200 tremors have been detected since the quake first hit on Monday, which means this, because it's right on the tectonic plates, right? You're literally, it doesn't matter if you're within 100 or 200 miles of a tectonic plate, you're on a tectonic plate. It's a tectonic plate. We're talking about the tectonic plate, the Earth's crust itself going, ching. So the extent of the damage from the quake was becoming increasingly clear more than 24 hours after it struck the Noto Peninsula. It comes at a sensitive time for the Japanese nuclear industry, the degenerate, despicable, hateful scum nuclear industry, which has faced fierce opposition. Not from me, of course. I'm very civil. I don't hold a grudge against these degenerate monsters. So last week they lifted an operational ban imposed on the world's biggest nuclear plant. Which is that boy right up there. The Nuclear Non-Regulatory Agency said no irregularities were found in nuclear plants along the Sea of Japan. They got the street creds of a cockroach at best. The closest to the epicenter had been idle since 2011. But we're hearing completing different stories from the different medias. The company has previously said it hoped to restart the reactor in 2026. Right? But we got other media saying that its 2 reactors were down for maintenance. Chinese TV host mocks earthquake hit Japan. They should do some deeds less. In Chinese, that means they shouldn't be dumping water. An anchor with the regional broadcasting group posted a video titled, "The Comeuppance Arrived, Earthquake in Japan." It turned to matchsticks. Look at it. After the tremor hit the country, which is an earthquake, by the way, not a tremor. A tremor is like a very small shake. An earthquake is an earthquake. And there's easy to know the difference when it happens. With such a large-scale natural disaster happening on the first day of the year, I'm afraid Japan will be shrouded by gloomy clouds for all of 2024. Perhaps Japan should do some deeds less and should not have discharged nuclear water into the sea. Well, I'm going to blow your bubble here, buddy, but oh, I forgot to switch back. Bear with me. We're totally lost here, are we? There I am. We got lost. Well, not only was Japan dumping water nonstop, you can't contain it because you got multiple nuclear meltdowns and 8 fuel pools that have melted down. The plumes, and there's many different models, like this is the explosion reactor 3. That plume model over there, April 7th, that's 26 days later, the plume is covering the entire planet. So don't worry about dumping, worry about these destroyed reactors, worry about this been going on for 12 years. So that media was promoting propaganda. Earthquake survivors in Japan sleep in coats and hats as shelters without heat or running water. No heat, no running water. And whenever an aftershock happens, I think of the main quake and my body trembles. And Monday's earthquake on the first day of the new year killed at least 73 people. So what I was doing for today's stories was just recycling the 1 hour news cycle. So everything posts within 1 hour. That's what we were grabbing. The prefecture official website, we being me, the prefecture's official website added that an unknown number remain missing as authorities continue searching for those trapped under rubble or in cut-off areas. Well, there's a lot of areas they haven't got to. 70 people rescued over that night. The number of missing people were still being counted, which is bizarre that they can't give us some kind of number. Photos across the region showed entire multi-story buildings had fallen on their side, burned structures, and rubble where houses once stood. Yeah, the rubble was really something what we're seeing. And we got a bunch of pictures coming up in a minute, less than a minute. Roads in and around the peninsula are blocked, though some routes are being cleared for vehicles to deliver food and essentials to the impacted areas. And so this is photos. Japanese rescue crews continue to search for survivors and work to reach isolated communities. This was just a few hours ago. There's communities they still haven't reached and are significantly destroyed. This shows some of the rescue efforts and widespread damage. We'll come back to the full screen. You've seen that picture last night, the night before maybe, or last night for sure. That was a landslide, and that was a significant one. This is a different picture of the tsunami that came in, so significant damage. The fires, of course, burnt hundreds and hundreds of homes. The incredible damage, boats being washed up on the wharfs. So this was a real tsunami, and we're expecting many more tsunamis from that area because that fault line is very, very active right now. That's a 10 out of a 10 on the Richter scale, Doctor. Look at the buildings that are collapsed. The Shindo scale is 7. Let me show you how that works, actually. About time we got to bring up the poll anyway. Is nuclear power an abysmal curse on Japan's country, food, health, species, survival, and its future. Oh, hell yeah, Dana. Okay, so you're going to take, the Richter scale is a 10. So take 10, divide it by 7. And you got 1.428. So take 1.428 and multiply it by 7, which is the scale it was today, and you got a 10. You get how it works? So it doesn't sound so bad when you say 7. It sounds much worse when you call it what it actually is, a 10. The whole idea of that scale was to manipulate you. And so most people can't work it out on their own because the industry is very vague. That must feel like hell to stand up right there, right? And bless their hearts, the rescuers got a thankless job, and they got a heartbreaking job too, because there's a lot of heartbreaks to be found. And a lot of people like TEPCO would probably go in and snatch them and bring them over to Fukushima if they could. These are people walking through a landslide area. And what goes through her mind, I wonder, when she goes through her hometown? 2023 was also the year in volcanic activities. Wow. Japan quake exposes fire risks to picturesque old neighborhoods. About 200 structures went up in flames in the New Year's tremor. And it's only recently we've seen them start to use that word instead of earthquakes. Because they want a nuclear renaissance, so they've been downplaying it significantly. Fire in the city of Wajima that lasted into the morning and spread to roughly 200 buildings. There's a 360 meters of road, over 1,000 feet of road, where stalls and shops were lined, is all gone. This is a historical landmark area that brings in hundreds of thousands of tourists each year, and is disappeared. Yeah, it's pretty heartbreaking. Japan airline passengers said it was a miracle they escaped from the burning plane. We could have died. Apparently, they evacuated that plane in 90 seconds. It took them 90 seconds to get out of the plane. Harrowing stories have started to emerge from some of the 379 individuals that collided with a Coast Guard aircraft on the Tokyo runway, bursting into flames. The plane was landing. It wasn't on the runway. It was coming down and landing. 5 of the 6 people on board the Coast Guard plane died in the collision. The pilot was severely injured and is in a Tokyo hospital trying to survive. It's the aftermath. That's a crispy critter right there. The cabin was consumed with smokes within minutes. We seen video. We covered that last night. We threw ourselves down on the floor. The emergency doors were open. We threw ourselves at them. The smoke in the cabin stung like hell. It was hell. We have no idea where we're going, so we just run out into the field. It was total chaos. I don't see a single passenger on the ground. He's the professor from London's University of Greenwich, which means he's a sack of shit. I don't see a single passenger on the ground or in any of the videos I've seen that have got their luggage. Well, I seen them. We showed it last night. Lots of people had their luggage in their hand, like their overhead luggage. So he's claiming he didn't see any of it. And we hear these connotations about the Japanese during accidents, major events. There's no panic and everybody's very orderly. That's the complete opposite of reality, what we find out later. Don't trust professors, for goodness sakes. I know that might sound crazy to you if you haven't been around here very much, but I got folders and folders and folders of evil professors. It's very difficult to find an honest one. Have we ever found an honest one? I don't think so. Japan's Coast Guard plane not cleared for takeoff before runway crash. So there's rumors that he never had it's back and forth, right? They were cleared to land, and Coast Guard wasn't cleared to take off. And it looks like a stupid mistake. There was a lot of stress. They're bringing supplies into the earthquake zone, and they just jumped the shark, so to speak. Probe begins in the Japan Airlines collision as both pilots say they received a go-ahead to use the runways. Well, I'm not here to debate any of this. I am here to say that don't trust BBC. Don't trust these hacks, these disgusting hacks for a second. And this lady, she was there. She said 90 seconds or something to get off the plane. And they're traumatized. She had her kid with them. The air traffic officials gave the JAL airliner landing permission, and while telling the Coast Guard pilot to wait before entering the runway. The Coast Guard pilot said he also had been given permission to take off, and the Coast Guard said officials were verifying the claim. Hey, just a simple mistake, and that's how it plays out, right? A lot of stress in all corners. So, released a transcript of the air traffic control communications of about 4 minutes and 27 seconds before the crash. It showed no clear takeoff approval for the Coast Guard plane. Yeah, and he lost 5 of his buddies. He's still in shock, the poor, and he's severely injured. Japan's earthquake, eerie search for bodies near the epicenter. And whatever you do with this BBC, don't trust these scumbags, for God's sakes. Watch buildings still smoldering. Throughout the town, traditional wooden homes lie splintered on the ground or collapsed, not made to withstand Japan's endless earthquakes. They're trying to downplay it because they want to promote nuclear. BBC promotes nuclear, right? Their job is to downplay it. It has taken us 2 days to get this close to the epicenter of the earthquake, the country's most powerful in 12 years. That's an understatement. 7 out of 7. We lost count to how many times we were forced to turn around because the roads were so severely severed. I despise BBC with all my soul, especially after Jimmy Savile molested over 1,000 children there in the basement. At least 73 people are known to have died in the quake. So infinitely more than that, and we know that. Some parts of the town are still cut off by ruptured roads and landslides. And like I say, the footage still hasn't come out. It usually takes a week or 2 or 3 weeks before the footage shows up. And even then, because of the nuclear power plants, they're hoping for a renaissance. Well, they're going to downplay this. They've always had earthquakes here, but I just didn't think we'd get big ones like this. And it's the aftershocks that concern them. There have been more than 200 tremors, these are not tremors, these are not small tremors. These are actually earthquakes we're talking about. And this was the original footage, which was of Suzu, but it doesn't really tell us much because it was a waste of time for me to try to capture it. Operational ban lifted on major Japan nuclear plant. That's not the one we're looking for. Bear with me. I'll show you this one right here. Up there. So they just removed any restrictions. This is for TEPCO. This is TEPCO's plant. TEPCO is going to open another plant on another fault line. So I'll read the poll because I see people are having a problem with the poll. Is nuclear power an abysmal curse on Japan's country, food, health, species, and survival in its future? And it seems like with my polls, the answer are always yes. My polls are about educating the population too. And because nuclear is such a damaging, destructive industry, Japan's non-nuclear regulatory agency. I say that as a joke, right? Because they don't regulate anything. And they were created post-Fukushima. Their job is to cover up. The largest nuclear site in the world after shutting it down about 3 years ago due to safety concerns. It's on a fault line with 2 tectonic plates within about 50 miles of it. Why would you want to open that disgusting nightmare up for it? Search presses for an earthquake survivors as Japan grieves the lives lost. Let's go through these pictures. We're almost through. Total destruction in many, many places. But that's not Suzu. We still haven't got footage of Suzu where around 4,500 homes collapsed. Incredible damage. They put that jacket on her, gave her a helmet to get her out of there. And they're not coming out alive, obviously. But the damage is really staggering. You can see where buildings were just shaken apart. I got no idea what I'm looking at there. Does anybody work this one out? The car is suspended, or the van is suspended up in the air. And there's another truck and trailer over there that are trapped under the buildings. So is it fair to say there was some ridiculous shaking going on right there? There's a whole lot of shaking going on right there. For God's sakes, man, don't eat anything in half of Japan. Do yourself a favor and survive as long as you can. There's another landslide. It's hard because it's such a big area, right? It's hard to appreciate it. Well, look at these drops, eh? Wow. And this, I'm assuming, where the tsunami came through, because they're not burnt. But they're certainly destroyed, aren't they? Let's just zoom in on them. If I get it together. Yeah, because they're not destroyed. That's the tsunami, I'm assuming. Look how the buildings are just torn apart. And when you see the debris pile up, that's emblematic of a tsunami, right? When you look up right there, serious damage. One big jumble, isn't it? It's insane. You know, I was thinking those beams we're seeing were supports, but they're not actually supports. That's that 6-story building that tipped over. You got hundreds of aftershocks. You have to run away from there. So it's very difficult to go in there and explore it. Researchers searched the rubble collapsed homes in western Japan on Wednesday in the hopes of finding survivors of this week's earthquake, which killed dozens of people. Well, it's probably the more likely, ultimately, I'm assuming it's going to be several hundred, because there's many areas they haven't got to, including 4,500 homes that are destroyed. As many aftershocks, which is the appropriate term, not tremor, and the surrounding area toppling thousands of buildings. Think about that again. Toppling thousands of buildings. We haven't seen that documentation, have we? At best, we've seen a couple of hundred. They're talking about thousands. They're talking about Suzu, which we still haven't got. In Suzu, a coastal city of 15,000 was hit by landslides, and 90% of the homes, of the 5,000 homes, have collapsed. Reduced to grey ash and rubble by a fire sparked after the quake. Yeah, and there's very few rescuers so far. You don't see much heavy. I don't know if we've seen any heavy equipment at all, which is bizarre. That's normally the first thing you see is all this heavy equipment, right? You don't see any rescue groups. Like, there's that one right here, but they just showed up today, basically. But we're not seeing this enormous amount of support. We're seeing all of, like these. You can see a firefighter in that picture up there, but you would expect to see dozens, if not hundreds. Large cracks appear on Japan's highway after the earthquake in central Japan, connecting Nano and Kanazawa. So the serious cracks showed up. It's hard to appreciate it because it's a video, right? But there's a significant drop right there. And somebody got to appropriately put a pole right there. It's split right across the highway and straight up the highway like a big X. That's a landslide. It's the landslide of joy. But then the video kind of went back there again for some reason. China suspends news anchor for calling Japan's quake retribution. Yeah. But where's all the heavy equipment? Man, Japan really dropped the ball, eh? They don't want to alarm anybody because they want to restart the nuclear power plants close by, see? That's the guy who got suspended. He'll be back to work soon as you stop paying attention. So, you get the two nuclear power plants, but they're on a fault line of the Eurasian plate and the North American plate. And there very well could be a nuclear accident going on in one of the fuel pools. And there's zero possibility going to tell you. It's zero possibility. The industry cannot survive another nuclear meltdown. That's our poll. We're going to close our poll down tonight. We got the tarp on the boat today. Is nuclear power an abysmal curse on Japan's country's food, its health, the species, the survival of all humans and species, and its future? And that's 100% roger that. That's 100% yes. Somebody accidentally voted no, but that happens every once in a while. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. Have a great day tomorrow. I'm not sure if I'm doing a show tomorrow night. I'm burnt out. I may feel better tomorrow, but I'm burnt out right now. And we got the heater put up in the shed. And blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of work to get tarp on the boat today and do it right. Last winter, there was so much wind and those tarps, they break down after a couple of months of sunshine, right? And, what else was I going to tell? Hi, everybody. Hugs, everybody. Kevin G donated $30 last night. Kevin, thank you. Hi, everybody. Good night, everybody. We'll see everybody on the next show. I'm not sure if it's tomorrow night or Sunday. There's a possibility I'll be back tomorrow night, so you'll just have to check. Have a great day. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody on the other side. Take care, folks.